Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World, episode 125. I'm your host, Jon Jordan, and joining me today is Chris Akhavan, who is the Chief Gaming Officer at Magic Eden, which is very exciting. First one there, the Chief Gaming Officer. We're going to find out what one of those does. Maybe you're sort of, as the first one, maybe you can make it up as you go along. I don't know, that's good.
It's a great title, though. I'm pumped about the title.
Yeah, good.
I'm sure the 12-year-old version of myself would be blown away.
But you've been in games for a long time, so we just sort of saying our paths have sort of crossed as we were both in the mobile game space for a long time. Yep. You spent a long time at Glue Mobile doing free-to-play mobile games, bit of time at EA when they were acquired. You spent done some short bit of time with Forte doing some advisory work there, and then announced at Magic Eden in December last year. Yep. But I think it's always a good question. You've got the games thing, you've operated in the space, you know how that works. How did the blockchain bit come in? So how did that sort of was that like a big awakening?
Yeah, for sure. I'll give you a bit of my background to give you some context. So, I grew up a hardcore gamer my whole life. My first gaming job was a QA tester, actually working on a game that was for Electronic Arts. It was a Medal of Honor expansion pack that a company called TKO was building at the time. So that was kind of my first entry into gaming. But then I really got in the game industry back in the early days of when everyone was making games on top of Facebook and MySpace, what was at the time called the social gaming era. Yeah. It was also around the time that free-to-play was starting to make its way into the Western market. Got really started in gaming then. And then from there, obviously iPhone came out 2008. I started to get excited about mobile gaming and continuing to build on this whole free-to-play model, which was still very primitive back then. I made the move into mobile, first as part of a company called Tapjoy that had built this ad platform really tailored to free-to-play mobile games to help drive both discovery and monetization. They're now owned by Unity. And then in 2013, I became the Chief Revenue Officer at Glue. It was a public company at the time. Back then, we had these mostly really action-oriented shooter games. I think you're getting a call, huh? We'll do it live. Games like Frontline Commando, Contract Killer, and so on. We went through quite a journey at Glue, basically trying to ride this crazy wave that we all went through in mobile free-to-play, seeing it grow from this tiny little market to now over half of the entire games industry. So I got to see that full evolution, that arc from kind of the primitive early days to this more modern, heavy UA-driven, live operations-oriented business that kind of dominates the market. And so anyway, along the way, I started to see some of the challenges in free-to-play, namely just this really obsessive focus on the 1% of players that spend money. And even realistically, we're talking about a percentage of that 1% that are the big spenders. And some of the downsides of that model, obviously, that have been broadly talked about, play to win really dominating what drives people to spend, power creep, and so on. And so as Web3 started to really emerge in the world of gaming, I got excited about the potential for this technology to create a kind of a new shift where the incentives between the actual gamers and the developers and game communities, and also people that just create content on top of games, could be better aligned in a more healthy and sustainable way. And so, I've been focused on the space ever since.
And but I guess what you're saying there is as sort of free-to-play mobile sort of matured, sort of some of the sort of I guess all sort of new technologies sort of start off very exciting. Everyone's finding out what to do, and then sort of some limitations come. Why particularly blockchain? Because there's lots of other there are some people who sort of see those same problems with free-to-play and have free-to-play mobile and don't then sort of move into the blockchain space because they think there's different ways of sort of doing it. So how did blockchain sort of specifically, were you into crypto before, or did that sort of help you?
No, actually I did not. Yeah, it's a great question. I did not come from crypto at all. No. Web3 gaming is actually what got me into crypto, so it was the other way around. I'd say I probably started to get into crypto more because playing some of the earlier breakouts like NBA Top Shots and Axie. Funnily enough, that's what kind of pulled me into the broader crypto rabbit hole and got me into just NFTs more broadly, and so on. And so the reason why Web3, I'll give you a specific example at Glue that got me excited about this. Was we had a game called Racing Rivals, where you had these really high-end sports cars licensed, we had BMW and so on, and there was a very strong gray market in that game, right? Because players basically wanted to figure out how to sell their cars to each other, and we didn't enable that directly in the game, but we actually had there was a mode where you could challenge another player to what was called a pink slip race, where I could put my car on the line, you could put your car on the line, and then whoever lost, would get the other person's car. And so all these forums started to get created on places like Facebook groups and other channels where people were like, hey, I want to sell my BMW. Meet me in the game. If you pay me on PayPal or whatever, I'll lose my car to you. And so just seeing that firsthand, that inherent demand where players wanted to have more ability to just have control over the assets that they owned, to me was a big kind of click moment. Plus, I'm really into Counter-Strike and collect Counter-Strike skins, so just inherently understood the value of this kind of ownership. And then to take it to the next level, with Web3 technology, not only can players actually own and interact with these assets in just kind of a transactional way, I got really excited about the whole composability aspect, where now that all of this information is on a public blockchain, all the cool ways that different developers and teams could create different experiences on top of that, with that open library of information on who owns what. And so, I got excited, from the very basic idea of a player-to-player marketplace. That's cool. But then also well beyond that, what now can you do when this whole ownership layer is fully public and exposed and composable?
Yeah, no, I remember that racing rifles game and reading about that sort of pink slip sort of feature, and it sort of I wasn't sure, it didn't make sense. It's like this is it's really really radical, but who sort of wants to lose their car? But it's sort of, I guess this was interesting, and I guess definitely the CS:GO skins thing, where as I've mentioned in the podcast before, it's sort of not really hilarious, but ironic, I suppose, that Valve have been running this platform that's doing billions of dollars of volume every year, which is effectively centralized NFTs on CS:GO skins, but they won't allow NFTs on a proper blockchain because they don't own that. So but it is funny when you look back. There are these very clear blockchain sort of elements in some games and some platforms already, and so to that degree, blockchain is actually very clearly just the next evolutionary step rather than the revolution.
Totally agree.
Okay, so let's move a bit on to Magic Eden. So I get you're around with lots of experience. I'm sure sort of people are asking you to join companies at various times. So what did the sort of this chief gaming officer job at Magic Eden? Why was that the one you kind of thought this is where I can have the impact? This is going to be fun.
Yeah. So I guess as I was thinking about what does this ecosystem need to thrive and succeed, one of the things that was just top of mind for me is obviously just discovery in general. Web3 games right now, on the positive side, billions and billions. I mean, you probably know the number, but I think it's $8 billion was invested into blockchain gaming companies in the past couple of years. So there's a lot of capital. There's a lot of great teams building. But you mentioned Steam. It's a good example, but also obviously Apple, Google, even Epic, who allows Web3 games, has restrictions on how you can actually execute them. And so the challenge I saw is the space for a lot of these studios to succeed. They're going to need avenues to get their games discovered, initially by a more Web3 savvy audience, right? Because I think there is also this progression where I think a lot of these games will initially succeed with more Web3 native, or people are just kind of comfortable interacting with wallets and things like that, and then over time expand to more mainstream audiences. And so I thought Magic Eden could basically serve as that discovery hub to kind of propel the initial really strong cohorts and games in Web3. And also, importantly, provide them with a marketplace where players can transact with each other. Because the reality is you can't really put that marketplace inside of a game that exists on any of those major storefronts today. Yeah. So I think we're kind of solving two really important things, which is, one is just top of funnel discovery. And then two is just that commerce layer that really can't go inside of games today. It has to exist on websites. And so Magic Eden being one of the leading NFT marketplaces in the world, I thought that was a great fit. The founders and the team were just really bullish on gaming, so there's also just that appetite to really invest in gaming specifically and create game-specific product on Magic Eden. And the fact that they already had really significant reach into this Web3 native audience that we could immediately offer to game developers. All of that made it really attractive to me. So I took on the role as chief gaming officer. So I'm responsible for all things gaming. We've really grown the team in the past few months. So now we have a dedicated engineering team. We've hired a game dedicated product manager. Really pumped about. We've got a BD and corp dev team to work with game developers. And so I think over the coming months, you'll see us start to build and ship a lot of more custom game specific features. As an example today, like we do these what we call launchpad mints to help projects mint collections of NFTs. Today we've done a bunch of gaming launchpads, but we more or less treat them like any other NFT mint. And so over time we want to obviously like showcase games in ways that are really game specific and kind of does them justice. And same thing on the marketplace side, like really giving better context around like the different game items and letting users try to find like, based on the meta of a particular game, what asset should I be buying and how to make those decisions.
Okay.
And also, social and community features, so we can start to build this Web3 gaming community and let players kind of communicate and interact with each other, give tools for the game developers to also communicate with their audience through Magic Eden. And so I'm really excited about the roadmap we're currently focused on.
Because that definitely is one of those things, and I think even, to be fair, when Magic Eden came out, it was a step, it was always a bit more than a marketplace, although a lot of the functionality when it launched was a marketplace. It was clearly something a little bit different. I mean, OpenSea obviously has this sort of legacy, history of being in there, and is the place where the big sort of PFPs were traded, even though, game stuff is traded as well, but that's always has that sort of slightly different edge because of just the way its history has been, whereas Magic Eden, and because of the way, I guess, Solana sort of when it launched had a lot of the big NFT collections on there were actually games in a way that they sort of weren't on Ethereum. So, but it will be very interesting. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to see how Magic Eden sort of moves away from becoming a marketplace into this. There will be a marketplace there, but marketplace is perhaps not the most important thing that it becomes because there's other stuff going on there. So
yeah, totally.
Cool, and I guess sort of part of that is in terms of the sort of recent news is moving from just Solana only now to Polygon, the whole multi-chain sort of thing, and obviously loads of games on Polygon at the moment, so that sort of also plays into that.
Yeah, we're excited about that. Yeah, we launched on Polygon and back in December, I believe. So we're coming up on 2 months into that journey, and it's been a lot of fun. And obviously, Polygon's got a really vibrant gaming community being built around it, and so ultimately our goals are to serve creators, both NFT creators and game developers, and so. We plan to continue to expand to chains that are starting to pull together those communities. Polygon was kind of an obvious choice for us to expand to.
Although saying that, I mean, obviously we mentioned sort of December, and you joined in December, and in terms of like the times to join an industry. December may have been a bit like, is it? Maybe I made the wrong choice. I mean, how did you feel suddenly becoming, all that sort of trauma, which I'm sure, you would have had if you were still at EA.
Oh man,
put it that way.
What a journey this whole Web3 thing has been, right? It's.
You got the grey hairs are starting already. I think.
Oh, absolutely.
You look pretty clean. Actually.
Also, we had like 2 babies in the same amount of time that I've been in Web3, which is pretty crazy.
Oh wow,
too.
okay. You're doing very well then.
It's been a wild period of time, but yeah, it's also been fun. It's been obviously super interesting to see this entire new ecosystem try to find its way, and obviously we've got tons of bad actors that has really kind of been an unfortunate shadow on top of things, but. Given what happened last year, I think the positive of that is that a lot of that has now been filtered out. Like a lot of those bad players have been filtered out, and people have become much smarter around, what to watch out for and how to make this a healthier ecosystem for everybody involved. So I think there's a lot of positive there. I still am bullish that. The way I view this is your typical cycle. We're now kind of in that valley of despair, right? Like obviously, like late 21, early 22, everyone was just like through the moon pumped about Web3 and Web3 gaming in particular was crazy bullish. And so like there was just there definitely was way too much euphoria back then, given how nascent this whole technology in the space is. And so inevitably that led to like a big crash and a pullback in sentiment. And now like I'm sure a lot of game studios that were exploring Web3 have hit pause and they're kind of in wait and see mode. But what makes me feel really confident that we're going to come out of this valley of despair and hit like a really strong period of growth and I guess prosperity is that I haven't yet come across a single game studio that raised money to build a Web3 game that kind of pivoted and said, we're going to give up. We're just going to go make this a normal free-to-play game. And so that level of conviction amongst the builders to me is what's the most encouraging is like, I've yet to see a single real builder give up, just because of just some macro bear market stuff or whatever had to kind of the noise that had to get filtered out of crypto in general. And yeah, so my current outlook is that there are just so many great games being built that we're looking at every day and meeting with studios. I think obviously great games take a long time to build, so we're just in that build stage for a lot of these studios, and I'm really optimistic, as we get to the second half of this year and really into next year, that a lot of these games are going to start to hit the market. And I'm quite confident, if I had to just predict, I'm quite confident that by the end of 24, we'll have at least a few Web3 games that become true, mainstream level hits.
Okay.
And I think that'll be the kind of the transformative, sort of tipping point moment for the whole ecosystem. And I'm sure as that happens, that a lot of the game studios that kind of hit pause will then hit resume and re-enter. Okay.
I'm actually maybe a bit more optimistic than you. I kind of think that we are actually seeing. I mean, I have this massive list of 800 blockchain games, but there's about there's about 50 which I consider pretty high quality. I may not sort of be massive fans of all of them, but in general I think they're sort of quite high quality in terms of their teams, and they've raised decent amounts of money and they have sort of good experience. And as you say, they're not sort of live yet, but a lot of those in that sort of slightly interesting kind of thing where they're sort of having their first closed alpha, open beta.
Yeah.
When's the game live now these days? Well, who sort of knows? But there is quite a lot of that sort of stuff happening now, where at least there's the first level of sort of functionality of. I mean, just to throw some.
Actual playable demos, previews. It's starting to become real. I mean, you're totally right. I mean,
I think those games. I think those games do need longer because they. One of the double-edged swords, I think, of Web3 development is people tend to develop in the open because you sort of have to build a community. So if you've got NFTs live, that's sort of part of the collaborative thing. Is you're sort of putting out a lot of builds in a way that a Web2 game developer wouldn't do that, because they sort of we want to keep it until it's super polished, and then we
totally. And then even when they do a release, they tend to do the soft launch strategy of only put it out in some whatever Switzerland or Canada. Very, very different approach here in Web3. You're right.
So we'll see. But so I would be a bit more hopeful for sort of the end of 2023. We'll start to see, maybe not mass market adoption, but we'll start to see some actually quite interesting games.
I agree with that for sure.
That at least are sort of overcoming the some of the kind of reactions of sort of gamers around this sort of stuff.
Totally.
And, I was going to ask you that as well. So obviously you spent decades in what I would now call sort of traditional gaming, and there is still sort of a backlash. And I'm sure that some of those people have quite enjoyed what's happened in the last year or so. I mean, have you sort of noticed that? Do you have people saying, "Chris, what are you doing? You're mad. Don't come back to the real world." Don't. or is that you just kind of feel like there is a slow sort of change happening there?
No, I mean, I think it is what it is. I'd say in general, I think the traditional games market realizes that it needs another growth vector, right? Because for the first time in a very long time, in terms of the macro, the overall games market's not growing anymore, right? We're actually, I think, what was it, down slightly last year versus the prior year. Yeah. And so I think in general, game companies, I think they all want this to work, actually. I don't see a lot of game companies that are Web3 is a scam or whatever. They actually are we're hoping that you guys can prove something out here and create a kind of a new blue ocean opportunity for the space. While a lot of them might be kind of in that wait and see mode, I think they are, in general, the sentiment is hoping to see some proof points that this could be a real opportunity to come back to. And then also, I think from the gamer perspective, I think that perception can also be really rapidly improved, right? I really like what Reddit did with their NFTs, right? The way they rolled them out more as just kind of hey, here's a free NFT, and they didn't even call it an NFT, it's called an avatar, and the wallet was just kind of built into your Reddit account. And so I'm really bullish on games finding ways to follow that pattern, where initially you can introduce people to these on-chain assets in a way that just feels like a reward for being part of the community, being a high-value player, and then smoothly kind of on-ramp them into seeing the value of how cool it is to actually own a digital asset, which has been cool to watch on Reddit, where I always check out their there's a subreddit, I think it's called Avatar Trading, which is basically all the people that have kind of figured out they own these avatars that they could actually sell on a marketplace. And it's cool to see how the the path through which they discovered that is one where they feel really positively about it. Versus, obviously, we had some bad moments in gaming. Like, obviously, like Ubisoft had the NFT rollout that didn't go so well in Ghost Recon, which was kind of marketed more like, oh, NFTs are coming into the game, and the gamers revolted. So I think it's probably just a matter of just like shifting that approach a bit, where the introduction of these assets to gamers is done in a way that feels a little bit more how Reddit did it, which is more like, here's a reward, here's something cool, and from there you can kind of build more deeply.
And I do think, in general, a positive sign I see, and I guess it's come from the general NFT space, is a lot more sort of free mints. And I think that a lot of the sort of problem has been around in the bull market. You can do like this is going to be a $500 NFT, and everyone's like buying in, and then they really, obviously, rightly so, really annoyed if it goes down to like $10 because they've like lost money. Whereas if you go to free mint, and if people want to sell it off straight away, that's they haven't lost any. They've sort of clearly gained something. Then I mean, you get gaming around getting onto the whitelist. Then so there's a different sort of manipulation going on. But at least then that those things are being given away. If no one cares less about them, then there's no money to be made. And if people really do care about them, then at least you've sort of taken. There still might be like a financialization sort of thing going on there, but it's not the primary thing because the developer has taken that off the table in the first place. So I hope
that's a great trend to call out. I'd say like I was actually just looking at our roadmap of launch pads over the next few weeks this morning, and I think actually all of them are free mints that are coming up. So it's very much the meta now. I mean, obviously Gabe Layden with Digi Daigaku has been a big champion of free mints, and it's pretty incredible to see what they've built in a matter of months. And another perfect example, right, of how that framing of how the users introduced to these assets makes such a huge difference. And I'm also really excited. I didn't mention this before, but one of the reasons I got excited about Web3 is like just the pain around user acquisition in traditional gaming has gotten so brutal, such a red ocean. All this IDFA and everything else that's made it even more difficult to operate that business. What these free mints really do is they basically give you this super energized golden cohort, passionate audience that's going to become part of your user acquisition. They're going to be the people that are going to be like helping promote the game, helping to build the community. And so it's kind of fascinating to see how that dynamic can emerge just through this very simple concept of like give people some free NFTs and let them be part of your community. From the early stages, instead of trying to the days of like pre-selling NFTs are pretty much done, right? Like if you don't have who's gonna come spend $1,000 on an NFT for something that they've never seen or have proof that it exists? So it's good to see. That's, I'd say, one of the very positive trends of kind of like what came out of last year is that the space has now moved to a much healthier mindset around how do you build the audience, how do you treat these initial mints and do them in a way that's like actually adding value to the communities.
And I think the other thing as well is that because I think I would say we sort of in this space we've had I think we've had successful products in the sense that I've thought these some interesting games that have brought innovation in and done it in a nice way. And obviously we've had Axie as a game that at one point was sort of mass market and at one point isn't. But there's not really been anything at the moment that anyone can sort of point to and go, this is the sort of blueprint for. This is how you do it, and I think to a degree that will come, but I think that's quite a nice sort of situation where sort of everyone's experimenting, everyone's trying to learn from everyone else. You're not competitive because what can you be competitive about? I mean,
right.
so and particularly with market sentiment being as it is, that takes the edge off it as well. So I think that we're in quite a nice situation for people just sort of seeing what you did and why did you do that and learning and hopefully that will sort of continue for the next 6 months.
I will say like the just like the game developer community in Web3 is really cool because the studios have that mindset that we're all trying to figure this out together. And it's very open. I mean, obviously the game industry in general has always been good about this, like just kind of helping each other out. But in Web3 in particular, it very much feels that way. Like we're all in the trenches together trying to figure out like what is the template, what's the playbook, like how do you make this all work? And so like the level of that open collaboration between game studios is great to see. Like no one's out here like, oh, I'm competing with that game or whatever. It's like, hey, we're all trying to figure out a successful playbook together here.
Yeah. And the other thing is that there is it works on two levels because everyone's trying to work out how to make their game the best, but also there is a little bit of everyone's activity is sort of creating that overall sort of market. So
totally.
So there is that sort of collaborative. Wider sort of thing as well, and it just is. I guess the thing that I sort of really learned in last year is this stuff is much more complicated than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
You know, we talk very simply about people owning, you know, these decentralized assets, and maybe we talk about composability or interoperability or any of this sort of, and these things are just actually so complicated to do that
Absolutely.
maybe we need to dial it down a little bit.
Yeah, and the game industry just naturally loves to see like proven patterns, right? Like everyone is like so driven by, oh, what's the top grossing game? Like how have they designed their whatever matchmaking or their clan system? And yeah, this space obviously doesn't have that yet. We don't have the blueprint to follow, so. It's to your point. There's a lot of complexity to figure out how do you actually deliver it in a way that makes sense to a gamer and feels fun.
Good, everything to play for. Well, excellent. That was really good, Chris. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. Good chat.
You can come back. We'll see if it has to be the end of 2023 and I was more optimistic, or whether I was wrong and it's the end of 2024. And we'll come back and someone gets
remind me.
Someone gets the winning rights. Cool. And thanks to you guys for watching, listening, however you're consuming the podcast. Remember, every episode we're talking to people who are building out this wholly new sort of sector of gaming, where it's a total mashup and there's so many different ways of building stuff. I just find it really fascinating. I hope you do too. So please subscribe. Come back next time to find out what's going on in the world of blockchain games.